Hello and welcome to this special show. I'm Ankita Mukherjee. The COVID-19 pandemic has had positive and negative impacts on different aspects of lifestyle behaviors. Negative lifestyle behaviors are seen to be associated with an increased risk of adverse outcomes from COVID-19. But while we've dealt with COVID-19, we've probably overlooked the fact that people's lifestyles have been severely disrupted. People have become physically inactive and developed irregular eating patterns while working from home. That in turn has led to unhealthier lifestyles and aggravation of lifestyle-related diseases. Now, of course, we've seen changes in patterns to our home life, to our work life, and most of all to our stress levels. A multi-dimensional approach is key now. With healthier diets, increasing physical activity, all of this can actually help us slow down diabetic epidemic and, of course, the spike we're currently seeing in heart diseases. This show, Beat Diabetes, Myths and Facts, will help you to do just that. As always, we're joined by several medical experts who will share with you their advice on just how to lead a healthy life. Let's take a look at our esteemed panel. Today, we're joined by Dr. Nakul Sinha, Director, Interventional Cardiology at the Heart Institute, Medanta Hospital, Lucknow. We're also being joined by Dr. Rajendra Deshmukh, MD Medicine, DNB Cardiology, Consultant Cardiologist with the Happy Heart Clinic in Nasik. We're also joined by Dr. Arun Kalyanasundaram, MD, MPH, FACC, FSCAI, Interventional Cardiologist with the ProMed Hospital in Chennai. Thank you all very much indeed for joining us on the show. Dr. Sinha, let me begin with you. Is it true that healthy young people are more prone to heart attacks post-COVID-19 infections? And what precautions should people be taking post-COVID recovery? We seem to be seeing more and more instances of young, healthy, fit people, especially active people who gym a lot, who seem to suddenly have heart attacks.
Well, good afternoon, ma'am. I think you have asked a very relevant question. The first thing we should realize that the COVID-19 virus induced inflammation in all the organ systems. And in fact, because the lung was the main sort of place where the virus was active, that we saw sort of so many lung problems and complications. Now, heart was not distant from that. And the heart muscle and the heart arteries, both were affected by the inflammation. And that caused a lot of problems. Now, I won't say that the COVID-19 induced attacks in absolutely normal people, but it probably aggravated and precipitated the problems in people who were prone to that. And in many other cases, we had severe rhythm disorders. The heartbeats became irregular, very abnormal, and that led to even sudden cardiac death. So, as you very rightly said, that we advise the patients in COVID recovery phase to go a little slow, take time to recover, give time to heal both the heart and lungs, and don't overdo the exercise.
When you talk about going slow, doctor, what sort of period are we talking about? Is it in the immediate aftermath of recovering from a COVID-19 infection, or should this care persist for several months?
See, usually 4 to 6 weeks were sufficient in most of the patients, and they could be monitored by their biochemical parameters and biomarkers like CRP and ferritin and D-dimers, etc. Now, if the patient had a complication in between, that period could be extended. And later on, we found that there was a post-COVID syndrome where patients used to feel a lot of fatigue, even low-grade fever, muscle weakness, muscle pains, and they were all unexplained. So this post-COVID syndrome in rare situations and rare cases extended up to even 6 months. But that wasn't the common story. The common would be around 4 to 6 weeks or a couple of months.
Dr. Rajendra Deshmukh, let me bring you in. People with comorbid conditions like diabetes and hypertension, and also people who have got stents fitted, seem to somehow be more at risk for heart disease. What tests should they be having regularly in order to prevent complications post-COVID recovery?
This question has two parts. One is complications because of COVID in a subset of patients with pre-existing comorbid conditions. So first part, COVID itself can cause a lot of complications in people who have no comorbid conditions as well as people with comorbid conditions. So how do I identify these complications? There are certain basic tests like C-reactive protein, D-dimer, and a very important test is venous Doppler. So whenever we suspect these patients are likely to have deep vein thrombosis, we should do a color Doppler of the legs. Now coming to the second part, people with comorbid conditions. Yes, definitely they are at a higher risk as compared to the general population because they have already diabetes, hypertension, and other conditions which are likely to have cardiac events. And on top of that, if they could get COVID, they have higher thrombogenic tendency. We need to screen them with X-ray, electrocardiogram, 2D echo, and stress test. How do they help? 2D echo will tell us whether they have landed up in some complications during COVID period, or a stress test which can identify whether they are likely to have cardiac issue in near future or during immediate period. So I think these are the basic tests which can fairly tell us about the impending complications in this group of patients.
Dr. Arun Kalyanasundaram, it said that silent heart attacks are of particular concern for people with diabetes. Could you just explain to us, what is meant when we talk about a silent heart attack, and why do people with diabetes have more of a risk of getting such a silent heart attack?
When we talk about a heart attack, it's basically you have a sudden cessation of flow to the heart itself, which just like every other organ in the body, requires oxygen and blood to pump effectively. So a sudden blockage here to the plumbing supply to the heart is what is a heart attack. Typically, when this happens, right, we have we have heard this classical thing where they're crushing chest pain and goes to the left arm or to the neck, or associated symptoms like sweating, etc. This is the textbook description of a heart attack. Now, not everyone has these symptoms. And in particular, when we talk about diabetics, and I'll kind of touch upon why very, very briefly in a second. They many times, up to almost 20% of diabetics have very minimal or no symptoms at all, and they might have had a heart attack. Now, why might this be? Because number one, people have a failure to recognize what is chest discomfort. Everyone thinks it's just a crushing chest pain. Sometimes it can be varied. It can be like heartburn, etc. Some people are truly asymptomatic. And the primary reason is twofold. One, diabetes itself puts you at a higher risk for heart disease and your concomitant comorbid conditions. And the second thing is that diabetes affects the autonomic nervous system, so the nerve supply, etc. And these are important for us to feel pain. So sometimes, because diabetes affects this, people truly have no symptoms, and then they might have had a heart attack, and that's a silent heart attack. So the definition again is a silent heart attack, minimal to no symptoms, and you've had a heart attack. That is by definition a silent MI.
Let me ask a follow-up to this. Dr. Nakul Sinha, we get so shocked when we hear of a young, healthy person undergoing a cardiac arrest. There have been sort of recent instances in the news, a very famous actor in the south of the country. How do we understand this in perspective? Are heart attack and cardiac arrest one and the same thing?
Now, the issue is that we as a population, the Indian population, is supposed to be slightly more predisposed to having heart attacks. During this COVID time, we saw many cases having an acute heart attack when there was really nothing in between or before that to have a pointer that they were predisposed. And two factors came out. One was an extreme stressful situation. Now that stress is usually, I would say, would be self-made, because people were isolated, they were sort of having loss of job, loss of profession, some personal tragedies. Right. And the second thing was that very high intensity exercise, because people started exercising at home. Now that was a good thing, but they didn't know what really should be done and what should not be done. So usually it is seen that very high intensity exercise can lead to a problem. our body is not really tuned to taking extreme stresses.
Okay.
So neither we should be couch potatoes nor we should be doing a gym
All
12
right.
hours a day or something like
So
that.
everything in moderation, whether it's how much we
Absolutely.
eat or how much we exercise.
Yeah.
Dr. Rajendra Deshmukh, we were already talking about the symptoms of a heart attack, and most people seem to think of severe headaches, chest pain, of course, the first one, but also severe headaches and shoulder pains. But are the symptoms of heart attack the same when it comes to men and women? Are heart attacks more common in men than women, which is the common perception?
Basically, your question can be divided into three parts. One is, do males and females have similar risk of heart disease? No. Females have protection from cardiac disease as long as they are menstruating. So once they stop menstruation, the males and females, they come almost at a similar risk. So that is the main difference when it comes to males and females. Second part is, apart from chest pain, are there any other symptoms which can present with the heart attack? Yes, there are many more important symptoms which unfortunately are ignored. What are they? Apart from chest pain, people can have shoulder pain, left shoulder pain. Very rarely they can have right-sided chest pain. And a commonly ignored symptom is gastritis-like symptoms, where they have acidity, abdominal discomfort, pain in abdomen, which is fairly common in people with inferior wall myocardial infarction. Rarely people can have choking sensation as well as back pain. So these are the symptoms which can be ignored and people can land up with the heart attack. So I think that gives answer to your second part. Third part of your question was, is there any difference in the presentation when it comes to males and females? Yes, females have more vague symptoms or non-specific symptoms during heart attack, like they have more of fatigue, uneasiness, and the presentation with breathlessness or dyspnea is more as compared to the chest pains. I think these are fairly common differences when it comes to gender.
All right, we will take a very quick break at this point on Beat Diabetes, Myths and Facts. When we come back, we'll also talk about tests, angiographies, and much, much more. We'll be back in just a moment. Welcome back to Beat Diabetes, Myths and Facts. Today we're concentrating on the link between diabetes and hypertension. And as always, we have medical experts trying to make complex medical issues simple for our understanding. Dr. Arun Kalyanasundaram, let me put this to you. When is there a need to actually carry out an angiography? Is there a procedure? What exactly is the procedure? And, how do we decide when, this has to be procedure based or when stenting is needed? How is that entire process happen?
Okay, the $1,000,000 question. So an angiogram is basically a test to study the plumbing supply of the heart. So typically, you go through the wrist or through the groin, take put in a very small tube and take a catheter all the way to to the top of the heart, essentially, and then you engage the vessels that actually supply blood to the heart, inject some contrast, and then there's a camera that goes around and takes pictures. This is still, as of 2021, considered the gold standard for diagnosing if you have blockages in the blood vessel supply or not. Sometimes people have heart attacks which fall under the spectrum of, you got to do this fairly soon. These come under, typically the non-ST elevation MIs and the unstable anginas, where people have worsening symptoms. You kind of see, okay, there's a smoking gun, so we got to go in and do it fairly soon. So typically in these instances, you want to do it 24 to 48 hours, with an onset of symptoms. And sometimes people have these, symptoms that have been lingering on for a long time. We used to refer to them as stable angina, but now we call them chronic coronary syndrome because there's nothing stable about it. So if someone says, hey, whenever I walk, I get winded or I get chest discomfort, I stop, it goes away, and this pattern has not changed over months or years, this is what we refer to as angina. And then if you want to diagnose for sure as to what it is, and then you go in and do an angiogram. So there are certain times when you want to do it urgently or emergently. There are other times when you can do it in a more elective manner.
Right. Dr. Nakul Sinha, is an angioplasty an elective surgical procedure? Can we postpone it, if there are COVID fears necessarily? Are there any modern medications that can help to delay the procedure? What is your advice to this, on this to your patients?
Well, as Arun very nicely described, sometimes when you are having an acute heart attack, then even minutes matter. And time saves the heart muscle. Time is myocardium. So then you don't really wait. But most of the other times, we get sort of opportunity to study the angiogram, discuss it not only with the patient, but with the attendants, the family, discuss the possible treatment implications, outcome, and of course the finances, because that's also an important part. But see, one thing is very clear. On one side, we have medical treatment. Now, medical treatment is extremely important. Why? Because not only it controls the symptoms, but it controls a lot of other risk factors, which otherwise would lead to increased recurrence of the events in forms of repeat heart attacks. Secondly, on the other side, we have either the surgical treatment, the bypass surgery, or the PCI, that's the angioplasty. Now, increasingly, angioplasty is able to tackle, let us say, around 70 to 75% of the cases in a reliable fashion, in a very non-invasive fashion, without cutting the chest open and having a prolonged hospital stay. But what we should all understand, that angioplasty and surgery are complementary to each other.
Right.
They are not to the exclusion of each other. They are symbiotic. Many a times after bypass, you may need an angioplasty, and vice versa. After angioplasty, the patient may progress in the disease and have a bypass.
Dr. Rajendra Deshmukh, what is cardiac rehabilitation? Is it compulsory for every patient who's undergone a cardiac procedure?
Yes, cardiac rehab is very important when it comes to patients who are recovering from cardiac procedure like angioplasty as well as bypass surgery. Unfortunately, in Indian setup, it is the most ignored part, I would say, that once they are operated, they start working and doing their regular job without paying any attention to the cardiac rehab. So what is cardiac rehab? Cardiac rehab trains you how to adapt to the underlying cardiac conditions, how to improve your stamina, and how to avoid or prevent the future complications. So these are the mainstay of the cardiac rehabilitation program. I think most of the major institutes in India now, they have this program under their roof, and we commonly recommend this to most of the patients. Unfortunately, very few patients follow cardiac rehab during initial period. Later on, they just drop out because of various reasons, or not knowing the importance of the cardiac rehab. So every cardiac patients, be it angioplasty, bypass, or valvular surgery, they need to undergo through this. They must get trained in the cardiac rehab program and then apply it at home as well.
Dr. Arun Kalyanasundaram, we've discussed major heart conditions. It's clearly, absolutely crucial to take care of heart health. But what are the rules of thumb for a layman to take care of his heart? What are the sort of 3 or 4 top things you'd talk about that absolutely need to be done?
Now, that's, again, a fantastic question. Thanks for bringing that up. I think some of it has been touched upon, but just to kind of consolidate the whole thing. Number one, I would say, is definitely if you smoke, you got to quit. Vaping is not a good substitute. 0 cigarettes is the only tolerable amount. So if anyone's smoking in today's day and age, I think it should be gone. Number one. Number two is diet. I think we need to really watch what we eat. The tips to a healthy diet, there are multiple fad diets. I would say stay out of it. In general, I think it's got to be mostly minimal processed stuff, mostly plant-based. Try and avoid sugars as much as you can, and fried greasy stuff is a no-go. Exercise, I would say most people should at least do moderate intensity activity, like perhaps 4 to 5 days in a week, and by that you're talking about 30 to 45 minutes.
Right.
The other thing, one of the new sayings which I found was very catchy is sitting is the new smoking. So try and keep moving. We all have sedentary lives, and definitely, I think the more we move, the better it is. I think Dr. Nakul very wonderfully put it. It does not mean you got to go to the gym and like sweat it out for 12 hours, but you got to keep the body active. The other big thing is about how we handle stress. These are stressful periods. I mean, for all of us, we have lost loved ones. It's just the world is increasingly stressful. So I think how we manage it is critical, and do something that whatever floats your boat. If it's swimming, if you want to, something that makes you happy. If it's meditation, yoga, something. Keep
Right.
manage your stress better. And the other thing which is often underemphasized is make sure you get enough sleep. None of us are, we all like to think of us as superheroes, but we all need sleep. Make sure you're not going on this chronic sleep deprived state, because that definitely stresses the body.
That's wonderful. I think those are all, words to live by, as it were. Easy, practical advice that all of us should be able to follow, but so very useful at the end of the day, and you can't reiterate it enough. Dr. Sinha, Dr. Deshmukh, and Dr. Kalyana Sundaram, thank you so much for joining us on the show.